Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Write Ambitions podcast, where we discuss writing, editing, grammar, and the English language. I'm Jenny Watts, your host. Thank you for joining me. Today, I would like to talk about a grammar rule or myth that you may have heard and you may be practicing, or you may not be practicing because you really don't even know what it means. And that rule states that you should never split your infinitives. Well, that's all fine and good. But before we know whether we're splitting our infinitives, we need to first understand what an infinitive is, and then we need to figure out why it's so bad to split that infinitive. So here goes. An infinitive is a verb in its base form, usually, but not always, preceded by the preposition to. So if I said, I decided to walk along the shore, the infinitive is the verb walk. So infinitives, verbs in their base form are walk, run, sleep, snore, cry, laugh. You get the picture. So the rule about splitting an infinitive actually comes into play when you add an adverb or descriptor between the words to and walk, or whatever your verb is. So if I were to say, I decided to slowly walk along the shore, I'd be splitting my infinitive by adding the adverb slowly before the verb, or the infinitive, walk. So Star Trek fans, take note. To boldly go where no man has gone before is an example of a split infinitive. Or is it? So you could argue that the preposition to isn't actually part of the infinitive, so there's really nothing to split. And sometimes it just makes sense to put your adverb before that verb. So I'm going to borrow from the book Woe Is I by Patricia T. O'Connor. This is a great book, and it really breaks down some of these grammar do's and don'ts and just, things about the English language in really relatable terms, so you don't feel like you're back in high school English class. So I'm going to read from a passage about splitting infinitives, or about the rule that states you shouldn't split your infinitives. So according to Patricia O'Connor, the truth is that the phrase split infinitive is misleading. Since to isn't really part of the infinitive, there's nothing to split. A sentence often sounds better when the to is close to the infinitive. And she uses the example, Dilbert decided to mention dating in the workplace. And there's no harm in separating to mention by putting a descriptive word or two in between. Dilbert decided to discreetly mention dating in the workplace. Okay, so that sounds perfectly normal. And it's right in front of the word that it mentions, or the word it describes, which is mention. And sometimes if you try to put that adverb somewhere else in the sentence, you're going to actually change the meaning of the sentence. So instead of Dilbert decided to mention dating in the workplace, if I were to say Dilbert decided to mention dating discreetly in the workplace, or Dilbert decided to mention dating in the workplace discreetly, that changes the meaning a bit. So it makes perfect sense where it is to begin with. So O'Connor also states, though, that you shouldn't really overdo it by adding a bunch of stuff. So Dilbert decided to discreetly and without referring to the boss's secretary mention dating in the workplace. That's a bit much. Also, sometimes rewriting a sentence to avoid a split makes it ridiculous. So you can't really rearrange the words in a couple of these examples. Carrie's landlord wanted to flatly forbid singing. Or this one, he threatened to more than double her rent. Or the landlord is expected to strongly oppose weaker noise regulations. You couldn't really put those adverbs anywhere else in the sentence and have the sentence still make sense. So, writers of English have been merrily splitting infinitives since the 1300s, and it was considered perfectly acceptable until the mid-19th century, when Latin scholars misguidedly called it a crime. And some linguists actually trace the taboo to the Victorians' fondness for Latin, which is a language in which you can't divide an infinitive. So this rule was actually popular for about half a century, until some grammarians debunked it. And it still persists today, even though it's not really a rule, and there's nothing wrong with doing so. So I say split away, and my challenge to you is to go forth and boldly split your infinitives whenever you feel necessary. And that's all I have for today, so please join me next time when I debunk another grammar myth. And until then, have a great week, and I will see you next time.